Everyone keeps saying you are stepping into a new year. But what if that sentence itself is the first illusion you need to see through? Nothing actually changes because a date flips. A calendar does not open a door. A number resetting has never carried anyone into a new life. If time worked that way, transformation would be collective. Everyone would shift at once. And you already know that has never been true. What is happening right now has nothing to do with January. It has everything to do with where your awareness has settled. From a quantum perspective, time does not move in a straight line. It responds to context. Reality does not unfold because minutes pass. It unfolds because the observer changes. When the observer stays the same, the year changes, but the life repeats. Different months, same patterns, same emotional gravity pulling you back to familiar outcomes. But when the observer shifts, the structure of time reorganizes itself, even if the calendar has not moved at all. This is why this moment feels unfamiliar in a quiet way. Not exciting, not frightening, not motivating either. There is simply a sense that the old rhythm no longer fits your body. Goals that once felt urgent now feel distant. Identities you used to protect feel thinner, less convincing. And the future feels closer than the past, as if it is already leaning toward you. This is not imagination. It is not random intuition. It is a signal that your relationship with time is changing. Most people believe they enter a new year. In truth, they carry the same internal frequency forward and rename it progress. Timelines do not respond to intention alone. They respond to coherence. And coherence is not something you decide with your mind. It is something your system stabilizes into. Physics explains this clearly. A system only changes state when its internal conditions shift. You cannot force a phase transition. You meet the conditions for it. Ice does not melt because it wants to become water. It melts because the internal balance changes. Consciousness works the same way. Right now, something inside you has crossed a threshold. That is why the language of fresh starts no longer resonates. You are not wiping anything clean. You are stepping out of a frequency that no longer responds to you. The timeline you have been living in has stopped feeding you emotion, information, and momentum. Not because it failed, but because you outgrew its signal. When this happens, the mind panics. It calls the feeling confusion. It calls it being lost. It calls it being stuck. But the field reads it differently. It reads disengagement, decoupling, preparation for reassignment. Spiritually, many traditions describe this as the in-between, not the old world, not the new one yet. A suspended space where identity loosens before it reforms. Most people try to escape this phase. They force clarity, they force plans, they force movement. But movement forced inside a shifting timeline creates resistance, not momentum. The truth is, you are not meant to move forward the way you used to. Neuroscience supports this more than most realize. When identity is updating, the brain reduces motivation for outdated reward loops. The dopamine that once drove familiar goals no longer activates the same way. This is not depression, it is recalibration. Energy is being withdrawn from pathways that no longer match where you're going. That is why planning feels strange. You can think about the future, but it feels hollow when shaped the old way. Vision boards feel flat, goals feel abstract, hustle feels heavy. Not because ambition disappeared, but because ambition tied to the old timeline no longer reaches you. You are not starting a new year. You are exiting an old pattern of time, and this is where most people make the same mistake. They try to drag the old self into a new timeline. They keep the same identity, the same emotional reactions, the same nervous system patterns. And then they wonder why the future feels exactly like the past. Timelines do not answer hope. They respond to embodiment. The moment your inner state settles into something different, reality rearranges itself around that stability. No effort required, no declaration, no ritual, just alignment that has become natural. If it feels like something has already ended before it officially ends, if the life you are still living feels strangely far away, if the future feels close, almost tangible, but impossible to define, that is not anxiety. It is not avoidance. It is not laziness. It is the sensation of a timeline loosening its hold. Some people cross into new timelines with almost no visible effort. while others repeat the same year under a new label. From the outside, it looks like luck, or timing, or advantage. From the inside and from the perspective of the field, something far more precise is happening. Timelines do not change because someone pushes harder. They change because someone stops broadcasting the signal of the old one. This is where manifestation is most misunderstood. People believe reality responds to effort, intention, or sheer willpower. But the field does not read effort, it reads state. It responds to what is consistent inside the nervous system, to what feels stable in identity, to the emotional baseline that repeats even when no one is watching. When someone appears to step into a new life effortlessly, it is not because they avoided work. It is because the internal work is already complete. Their system no longer swings between wanting and doubting, between hoping and forcing, between trusting and controlling. The signal has settled. And when a signal stabilizes, reality reorganizes without negotiation. Physics offers a clean parallel. When conditions reach a critical point, systems do not debate change. They shift, not gradually, decisively. Consciousness behaves the same way. Those who seem to move into new timelines without trying are not passive. They are coherent. Coherence means thoughts, emotions, and identity are no longer pulling against each other. What they want matches what they expect. What they expect matches how they behave. And how they behave matches how their body feels on an ordinary day. There is no internal argument running anymore. Most people live in contradiction. They desire one reality but emotionally prepare for another. They imagine expansion while bracing for disappointment. They speak about change while staying loyal to identities built around struggle. The field does not respond to words, it responds to contradiction. This is why effort alone never produces a real shift. Effort without coherence creates friction, and friction keeps the system unstable. Instability prevents probability from settling into a new outcome. Neuroscience explains this through prediction. The brain is constantly forecasting what will happen next based on past patterns. If your emotional and physiological state still predicts delay, strain, or instability, your behavior will quietly recreate those outcomes, even while your conscious mind insists it wants something else. People who shift timelines do not think positively. They stop predicting the old future. This change happens quietly, often without intention. After enough internal recalibration, the body no longer treats chaos as the default. Stress responses soften, hypervigilance fades. The constant scanning for threat or approval slows down. And when the nervous system stops expecting collapse, it stops generating it. Spiritually, this is what it means to leave one state and enter another, not through affirmation, through embodiment. Neville Goddard spoke about assuming the state of the wish fulfilled. What is often overlooked is that this state must feel ordinary, unforced, normal. And normal only emerges once the old state has dissolved. You cannot rehearse naturalness into existence. This is why some people do not realize they have shifted timelines until they are already living inside the new one. There is no ceremony, no announcement, just a quiet recognition that life responds differently now. Less resistance, cleaner timing, fewer emotional barriers around movement. They did not chase a new timeline. They stopped sustaining the old one. And if you are in the middle of this process right now, this part can feel deeply unsettling. As you disengage from an old timeline, its rewards fade first. The motivations that once propelled you forward disappear before new ones arrive. The identity that once gave you certainty loosens before a new structure forms. From the outside, this looks like stagnation. From the inside, it feels like uncertainty. But from the perspective of the field, it is accuracy. You are not meant to carry the old self into a new timeline. You are meant to let it dissolve so the transition can complete without distortion. Those who repeat the same year again and again are not unlucky. They are loyal to the same internal frequency. And loyalty, when unconscious, has tremendous power. If you are noticing that the old ways of motivating yourself no longer work, if former goals no longer light you up, if effort feels misaligned instead of energizing, that is not failure. That is disengagement in motion. There is a very specific moment in every genuine timeline shift when the old reality stops responding. Not dramatically, not through collapse, but through silence. The signals that once guided you begin to fade. Motivation softens, urgency dissolves, even resistance loses its charge. And when this happens, most people assume something is wrong. This is the most misunderstood phase of a quantum shift. A timeline does not end with chaos. It ends with irrelevance. What once pulled you forward or held you back simply stops working. Goals lose their emotional grip. Struggles stop feeling meaningful. Desire remains, but its tone changes. It becomes quieter, less desperate, less attached to outcome. This can feel deeply unsettling because the human mind measures movement through emotion. When emotion fades, the mind calls it emptiness, confusion, a lack of direction. But from the field's perspective, this neutrality is not absence. It is disengagement. You are no longer being fed by the old timeline. In physics, when a system stops exchanging energy with its environment, it is no longer part of that system. It becomes isolated long enough to reorganize itself. Consciousness follows the same principle. When your emotional and neurological responses stop reinforcing a certain reality, that reality begins to dissolve. This is why forcing motivation during this phase never works. Motivation belongs to the old loop. It was designed to move you within a structure that no longer exists. Trying to revive it only creates friction because your system has already withdrawn energy from that timeline. Neuroscience makes this clear. Dopamine is not only the chemical of pleasure, it is the chemical of pursuit. When the brain no longer predicts reward from a certain future, dopamine stops activating toward it. This is not laziness, it is prediction updating. Your nervous system no longer believes the old timeline leads somewhere worth going, so it stops responding. Spiritually, this is what many describe as being in between worlds. You are no longer aligned with the past, but you are not yet embodied in the future. Identity loosens. Familiar narratives lose authority. You may feel unexpectedly calm one moment and strangely disconnected the next. Not depressed, not excited, just suspended. This suspension is intentional. A timeline cannot fully release you until attachment dissolves. And attachment does not dissolve through logic. It dissolves through neutrality. When emotional charge fades, the bond breaks on its own. That is why this phase feels quiet rather than dramatic. You are not being pushed out. You are being gently unhooked. This is also why many misinterpret this phase as losing passion or losing themselves. In truth, you are losing identification with a version of you that was calibrated for a different timeline. The future self you are moving toward does not require the same emotional fuel, so the system stops producing it. If you pay attention, you may notice that even problems feel different now. They still exist, but they no longer dominate your inner space. You respond to them. They do not define you. This is one of the clearest signs that the old timeline no longer has jurisdiction over your nervous system. The real danger here is not stagnation, it is interference. Interference begins when the mind tries to reattach to the old timeline out of fear. When it attempts to recreate urgency, to force clarity, to manufacture purpose before it is ready. And that interference is the only thing that can slow a transition that is already underway. This kind of interference pulls the system back into fluctuation and quietly postpones the shift. The field does not react with punishment. It does not withdraw support. It simply pauses. It waits until you stop scanning the past for confirmation, until you stop projecting into the future for reassurance. It waits for presence to settle. Only when presence becomes steady can a new timeline respond without distortion. This is why this phase often feels invisible to everyone else. There is nothing to display yet. No evidence, no outward motion. Just an unfamiliar stillness inside, especially if your life has long been driven by pressure and tension. But this stillness is not emptiness. It is capacity. Capacity for a new identity to form without being shaped by old expectations. Capacity for the nervous system to establish a new baseline. Capacity for perception to sharpen now that emotional noise is quieted. If you are here right now, you are not lost, you are unassigned, and unassignment is the final requirement before reassignment. At this stage, there is one misunderstanding that can quietly pull you back into the old timeline if you are not aware of it. The belief that you now need to do something to make the new reality happen, to visualize harder, to plan more carefully, to force clarity into place. But timelines are not built through effort. They are accessed through resonance. You do not manifest a timeline. You attune to it. The quantum field does not respond to desire alone. Desire lives in the mind. The field responds to coherence. Coherence is the alignment between your internal state and the reality you are capable of sustaining without strain. When coherence is present, transition feels ordinary. When it is absent, manifestation feels exhausting. This is why pushing intention during a shift creates resistance. Effort belongs to linear creation. Tuning belongs to quantum access. Imagine it like sound traveling through a space. You do not shout louder to hear harmony. You remove what is distorting the acoustics. Force does not create clarity. Precision does. Stillness does. Allowing excess noise to fall away does. That is what is happening internally now. Your system is no longer meant to chase outcomes. It is meant to stabilize signal, and signal is shaped by what feels natural to inhabit, not by what you persuade yourself to want. Neurologically, this distinction matters. When you try to force a future while your nervous system is still integrating a new baseline, old stress circuits reactivate. The body interprets force as threat. Threat pulls you back into survival mode. Survival mode anchors you to the old timeline. So the very act of trying to manifest too early becomes the delay itself. Spiritually, this is where surrender is often misunderstood. Surrender does not mean inaction. It means non-interference. It means trusting the intelligence of the process instead of micromanaging it. Neville Goddard spoke of living from the end. What is often overlooked is that the end must feel normal. Effortful imagination still signals lack. Embodied coherence signals readiness. If forcing vision feels draining right now, that is not resistance. It is feedback. Your system is telling you that adjustment is already happening, and too much mental input creates distortion. This is also why the most powerful shifts often occur in silence. Language fixes identity. Silence allows it to reorganize. When you stop explaining who you are becoming, you give the system space to complete the transition undisturbed. You may notice that intuition feels clearer now, but quieter, less dramatic, more practical. That is attunement. When coherence is present, intuition does not need to shout. There is no internal conflict competing with it. This is the phase where alignment stops being emotional and starts being functional. Decisions simplify. You know what not to do without analysis. Certain paths simply stop registering. That is not indecision, it is selection. The old timeline required motivation, validation, and emotional charge to keep you moving. The new one does not. It responds to presence, to consistency, to a nervous system that is no longer seeking relief through outcomes. This is why tuning can feel anticlimactic at first. No rush, no spectacle. Just the quiet recognition that you are no longer resisting reality. You are listening to it. If you are here right now, the work is not to imagine a better future. It is to remain coherent in the present, to notice the impulse to force clarity, to allow silence to accomplish what effort never could. Because when tuning completes, manifestation no longer feels like creation. It feels like recognition. You begin to notice opportunities that were always there, but invisible beneath the noise. You begin to recognize timing without anxiety, movement without urgency. And that is when the new timeline starts responding. Not because you demanded it, but because you finally matched it. Leaving a timeline behind is rarely dramatic. It does not arrive with closure or certainty, and it almost never brings immediate relief. More often, it shows up as a quiet grief you cannot fully explain. Not grief for something you lost in the world, but grief for a version of yourself that no longer fits anywhere you are going. This is the part few people talk about. When a timeline dissolves, it takes identities with it. Old motivations, old coping strategies, old ways of proving your worth or keeping yourself safe. Even when those versions of you were heavy, they were familiar. And familiarity creates attachment, even to struggle. That is why letting go often feels heavier just before it becomes freeing. From a quantum perspective, identity is not fixed. It is a pattern formed by memory, emotion, and expectation moving together. When a timeline shift begins, that pattern destabilizes. The mind tries to rebuild it quickly because the absence of identity feels like danger. But rebuilding too soon locks you back into the old frequency. So the field does not rush reconstruction, it creates space instead. That space can feel deeply uncomfortable because it has no definition. You are no longer the person who had to push constantly to survive, but you are not yet the person who moves with ease. You are no longer driven by fear, but you are not yet guided by clarity. You are between identities. And that in-between state is not a mistake, it is a requirement. Neuroscience describes this as identity plasticity. When old neural narratives weaken, the brain enters a phase of openness. New self-models become possible. During this phase, motivation temporarily drops. The system lowers output so it can reorganize internally without overload. This is why trying to reinvent yourself too quickly feels wrong. Reinvention implies construction. What is happening now is dissolution. Spiritually, this is when attachment reveals itself most clearly. Not attachment to things, but attachment to roles. The one who fixes everything, the one who struggles, the one who holds it all together, the one who survives instead of receives. Those identities carried you through earlier timelines, but they cannot come forward unchanged. The grief you may feel now is not about losing opportunity, it is about releasing the role you played to earn safety. That role can feel like who you are, even when it never truly was. This is why the field does not hurry this phase. If grief is bypassed, the old identity travels forward unconsciously, and the new timeline receives mixed signals. Expansion arrives, but the nervous system experiences it as threat. So the letting go must finish. You may notice moments where you miss parts of yourself you know you cannot return to. Ways you used to push, ways you used to cope, ways you used to feel alive through tension. Missing them does not mean you should go back. It means the attachment is loosening. This is also where silence matters. Talking too much about who you are becoming can interrupt the process. Explanation creates definition. Definition stabilizes identity before it is ready. And right now, what you are becoming needs room to remain undefined just a little longer. Definitions fix identity too early. They anchor something that is still meant to move. The field responds best when identity remains fluid. You are not meant to announce who you are becoming yet. You are meant to let it settle. Leaving a timeline does not require dramatic decisions. It happens when your emotional system stops reacting the way it used to. When old fears no longer motivate you. When old rewards no longer satisfy you. That is when the bond loosens. And when the bond loosens, the timeline releases you naturally. No force, no resistance, no final confrontation. This is why people often look back and say they cannot pinpoint when things change. Because the shift was not an event. It was a quiet disengagement that completed itself. If you are feeling an unusual mix of calm and sadness right now, that is not confusion. It is integration. You are closing a chapter without needing to relive it one last time. When the release completes, the need to mourn fades. Not because the past was meaningless, but because it no longer defines you. When a new timeline begins responding, it does not announce itself. There are no fireworks, no sudden moment where everything clicks. What changes first is subtler. You notice that life no longer pushes back the way it used to. Decisions feel cleaner. Timing feels less strained. You stop negotiating with reality, and reality stops resisting you. This is stabilization. A timeline becomes real not when you step into it, but when you stop slipping out of it. Slipping only happens when parts of the old identity are still trying to survive inside a new frequency. That is why stability matters more than speed. A rapid shift without stability collapses. A stable shift compounds. From a quantum perspective, this is the moment probability locks in. The observer is no longer swinging between emotional states. So reality no longer needs to reflect contradiction. The signal becomes consistent, and consistency allows outcomes to repeat without effort. Neuroscience mirrors this precisely. When a new identity stabilizes, the brain stops scanning for danger in unfamiliar success. Stress hormones reduce. Decision-making becomes efficient. You no longer have to convince yourself that things are safe. Your body already knows. This is why the work now is not expansion, but integration. Integration looks simple. You stop overwhelming your life with intentions. You resist the urge to define the future too quickly. You allow patterns to form instead of forcing structure. You give your nervous system time to trust its new baseline. You stop testing it. This is where patience becomes intelligence. Not passive waiting, but conscious restraint. You notice impulses to rush, to prove, to secure certainty, and you let them pass. Each time you do, the new timeline stabilizes further. Spiritually, this is what it means to move with faith without asking for reassurance. You stop seeking signs because the absence of resistance becomes the sign. You no longer need constant confirmation that you are on the right path. The path feels internally quiet. The old timeline required effort to maintain. The new one requires presence. Presence is not something you perform. It is something you protect. As you move forward, the invitation is simple. Do not reintroduce struggle where it no longer belongs. Do not romanticize pressure. Do not confuse intensity with progress. The timeline you are stabilizing responds to steadiness, not force. This is why the coming year will not feel like a beginning in the usual sense. It will feel like continuation without friction. Like entering a room you have already been preparing for. Like remembering something you did not realize you knew. When uncertainty arises, return to the body. If the body feels calm, grounded, open, the timeline is holding. If tension appears, that is information, not failure. Adjust gently. Do not dramatize it. You are not starting over. You are not behind. You are not late. You are standing inside a timeline that has already begun responding to you. The only thing left is to trust the shift and allow it to finish what it started.